Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the last session of the main conference today. It's the first of two academic paper preview sessions. So as we discussed at the top of the day, this is there's a strong academic integration with policy and the business community in today and tomorrow's conference. And so we'll actually be having two parallel academic research sessions starting at 7 p.m. where 6 papers will be presented on both days on cutting edge AI governance research. So I wanted to show you the schedule for this evening so you can see what was happening. Arvin, can you give me screen share? I just want to show the paper schedule. So this is a Google Doc. I just put the link in the chat. So you can see that we have 2 parallel sessions starting at 7 p.m. CET. I'll chair session B, Marina Chuganova will chair session A, and we'll have 25 minutes per presentation. So it'll be about 15-minute slide presentation and 10 to 15 minutes discussion. Everybody's welcome to come to this. You can see the Zoom links here. By default, you can just go to session A if you like. That's the one that we'll post here. But if you want to go to session B, you click on this Zoom link here, which is the ETH link. We're going to share both of these links at the end today, so you can join at 7. And you can see we have 6 presentations. The first is on session A is by Alex Stremitzer with Kevin Tobias. Alex Stremitzer is a professor of law, economics, and business. My colleague at ETH Zurich, Kevin Tobias from Georgetown Law School, and they're going to present on AI and medical policy about black box medicine. Does AI raise a distinctive ethical challenge? Next in session A, Daniela Sele, who is also at ETH Zurich, will present We and It, an interdisciplinary review of the experimental evidence on human-machine interaction. Finally, Tobias Gesche will present Human Bias and Algorithmic Choice. Tobias Gesche is also from ETH Zurich. In session B, so session A is kind of the human AI interaction theme session. Session B is more on economics and computer science and text as data. So Nandan Rao from UPF will present Letting Text Speak to Economic Data. Naaman Joel will present, with some co-authors, will present InfoChain, a decentralized, trustless, and transparent oracle on blockchain. And then finally, Arianna Ornaghi will present some of our joint work on gender attitudes in the judiciary, analyzing gender bias in language and gender stereotypes in US circuit courts. So I just wanted to show you that. Check out this schedule. We have the schedule for tomorrow too, and I'll go over that tomorrow. But for now, we're going to have some short previews of this research, starting with Nandan Rao.
Cool, yeah, and was somebody showing slides or was?
Yeah, Arvin, can you put Nandan's slides on, please?
So our paper, as mentioned, is called Letting Text Speak to Economic Data. And as the name suggests, it's really about connecting data together, right? In this sense, the text side is text data, and we're looking at specific text corpora of online job ads and of patents. So patent descriptions, patent abstracts. And the economic data is, in particular, labor market data. And how are we connecting them, or how is the text going to speak to the economic data? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to try and classify, essentially, the text data by their occupations. So we're going to be interested in saying, okay, what official occupation code do these text corpora relate to? And the way we're going to do that is by using the official occupation descriptions, in this case, by the US government. So they created this thing called the DOT, the Dictionary of Occupation Titles. And what they do is they have descriptions. So this is a description of an aeronautical project engineer, for example. And the basic idea here is that, okay, as a human, I can read this, and it's fairly technical, it's fairly dry, it has a lot of specific language, but more or less, given the fact that I read English, I can understand more or less what an aeronautical project engineer does, enough so that maybe I can go out and recognize it in the real world. And what we're naturally going to want is that we can have a classifier, a machine learning tool that will go ahead and do that as well. And so if we look at Go to the next slide. If we look at the job descriptions, what we're going to have a bunch of online job descriptions like this, and we're going to try and classify them by the occupation that is being advertised in the job description. And what you see here is our model is basically trained in an unsupervised fashion just on job descriptions. And it's going to try and learn the context of job descriptions so that then when it's shown this sort of official description of, in this case, an animal care and service worker, it can recognize that in the real world, just like we would hope to do. And it's a bit maybe fuzzy here, but what's interesting about this example is you'll see that it's highlighting the words. This is an output of Lime, which is one of these transparency tools for machine learning algorithms. It's going to highlight words that are helping it make this classification. And one of the words that's highlighted is SPCA, right? And SPCA is a nonprofit organization that actually is a Society for the Prevention of Cruelty Against Animals, right? So it's sort of an organization related to animals. And here our model has learned, right? It's learned enough context about the world that SPCA is related to animals and therefore likely related to animal care and service workers after reading the dot description about animal care and service workers. So this is an example of it like working quite well. We didn't have to build up a dictionary manually. We just sort of gave it some unsupervised data and it learned how to relate that to the dot. So sort of this sort of nice successful example. And then we're going to go on and we're going to say, okay, that's great. We have these online job ads and we're trying to classify them. But maybe we can also classify more abstract texts or texts that are a little bit further from occupations. If you go to the next slide, we'll go ahead and look at patents. And so this example is fun because it has to do with a hot tub pillow, but it's also a good example of what I think is interesting to discuss and what I'd like to really present and talk about, especially in the context of this conference. We're just trying to really well define, okay, what does it mean when we're trying to connect a job occupation to a patent? And hopefully it's clear that it becomes not a very clear question, or there's a lot of different ways we can interpret that, right? Is it the person who sells the hot tub? Is it the person who built the hot tub? Is it the person who invented the hot tub? Is it the person who is installing the hot tub, right? A lot of different occupations touch a hot tub. And maybe a hot tub as a patent really isn't the thing that's related to an occupation. Maybe we're interested in pillows being outputs of textile workers, or maybe we're interested in sewing machines being sort of inputs along with textile workers in the process of creating textiles. So there's a lot of different ways to think about that problem. And so we're going to talk about ways in which we're approaching this and try and discuss that a bit. And that's basically, what I'll be presenting.
Thank you, Nandan. So as we'll have with the rest of the presentations, we'll have a few minutes for questions from the main audience in a few minutes. And also you're welcome to join for the full presentation later today. So secondly, we have Daniela Sele from ETH Zurich to present on human AI interaction along with Marina Chuganova. Hi, Daniela.
Hi, happy to be. Are you sharing my slides or?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, happy to be here. I'm going to be talking about a review paper that we recently wrote. You can just go to the next slide. And yeah, so there were two reasons for why we wrote this review and why it might be interesting to you as well. So first of all, as researchers in this field, it was difficult for us to get an overview of what we know because, as you can imagine, many people from many different disciplines are interested from very different perspectives on learning how humans interact with machines, how humans interact with automated agents. But not only is there a wealth of studies, but they also have come to very different conclusions sometimes. So what we wanted to do here, and the paper, as you see, is on SSRN, so we very much invite everyone who's interested to read it, and we'd be very happy to receive feedback, is to give a starting point and also to develop kind of what do we know and what is an open question, what is maybe a hypothesis that could bring inconsistent results from different disciplines together, and so on. So in the end, we covered 118 experiments, 8 observational studies, and 13 literature reviews from a wide range of disciplines. So not only economics and psychology, but also neuroscience, medicine, aeronautics, applied engineering fields, and so on. And just to give you a bit of a teaser, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to be sharing some key insights that we found. So first is that experiments show that human-machine interactions are social interactions. And in fact, what this means is that people apply social rules of conduct to these interactions. So they experiments show that they apply gender stereotypes to machines, for example, or they apply ethnic stereotypes to automated agents. They are nicer to a computer when a computer was nice to them first. And they even adjust these reciprocal actions to prevailing cultural norms. However, of course, human-machine interactions are different than human interactions. And one of the most striking differences is that they elicit less of an emotional and social response. Now, this can be positive. For example, just to give you a very clear example, medical studies have found that victims of domestic violence are more willing or more likely to disclose this violence to a computer than to a human, for reasons of social pressure, maybe. On the other hand, other studies found that people are also more willing to lie to a computer for their own gain, so to engage in unethical behavior. Now, what we develop in the paper is that it depends on whether emotions and social rules of conduct are beneficial or harmful in a situation. Then our paper also discusses the use of automated agents in the workplace, in particular as teammates or as managers. And we talk about papers that show that robotic teammates have an effect. So they affect the productivity of the human teammates, the behavior of the human teammates, and the way the responsibility in a team is distributed. But the direction remains unclear. So some papers show that productivity increases, others show that it decreases. And we talk about why this might be the case. Now, interestingly, humans seem also willing to accept automated managers, in particular for analytical tasks. And in fact, automated managers might even have an edge over human managers sometimes, because as we discussed, experiments show that they have an easier time with coercive, unpopular decisions, because these decisions, when made by a machine, elicit less of an emotional negative response. So people perceive them as less unfair, less unjust. Then the final section of the paper talks about automated decision-making. And here, I think there's a very interesting inconsistency in the literature. So on one hand, there are some experiments that show something called algorithm aversion. So the aversion of people to the use of algorithms in decision-making. And on the other hand, there are experiments which show algorithm appreciation, so a preference for automated decision support over human decision support, or automation bias, the over-reliance on machines, on automated decision support. For example, on a pilot flying a plane and trusting the autopilot too much. Now, there are a few different hypotheses for why this might be the case. And one that we develop in the paper is that humans might be averse to fully delegate their decision authority to a machine, but as long as they remain in control, or they feel that they remain in control, they might be very appreciative of automated decision support. Now, of course, this is just a short list of statements now, so I would invite you all to come to the talk later or to see the paper for more and for a more concrete development of these hypotheses. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Daniela. Excellent. So now we'll go to the next talk by Nandan Joel, also from ETH Zurich. Nandan, are you here?
Yes, hi. So hello, everyone. Nice to see you all here. So today in the academic paper session, I'll talk about InfoChain, a decentralized, trustless, and transparent oracle on blockchain, joint work with my former colleagues at EPFL, Cyril, RS, and Wel.kins. And in this preview session, I'll give you a brief overview of the problem that we tackle in this paper. So we all know that artificial intelligence and the blockchain technology presents a very promising direction for several important decision-making systems to be made fully automated and decentralized. However, the data in many of these systems is assumed to come from a trusted source, which not only makes the entire system centralized, but is also, it makes the systems prone to strategic manipulations. So how can we acquire trustworthy data for our decision-making systems without relying on a trusted third party? Arvind, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, okay. So consider this simple example. On the left-hand side of this figure, I show the traditional way of settling compensation claims by service providers. Trusted third party monitors the quality of service, and if the quality does not meet the standards promised that the service provider had promised its users, then depending on the observations of this trusted third party, the service provider may have to issue a compensation to the users. Now, if we want to decentralize this system by implementing this agreement between the users and the service provider on, let's say, an Ethereum smart contract, and remove the trusted third party, then we get a picture on the right-hand side where the users themselves report the quality of the service that they received. And now, if according to the user reported quality, a violation of the agreement is found to occur, then the smart contract automatically triggers a compensation to the users. But it's not difficult to see that this solution won't work in practice because the users obviously will lie in this case and say that the quality was bad, so that even if it was good, so that they can get compensated. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So what we need here basically is a game theoretic incentive scheme to make sure that the reports submitted by users are truthful, even when they have these external incentives to lie. So if you're interested to know more about this problem setup and our solution, then please do attend my talk today at 7:30 p.m. And even though the session is called academic paper session, this work has a lot of commercial applications in service monitoring, insurance, banking, trade, and governance, etc. So I particularly encourage practitioners and people interested in startup ideas to attend the talk. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Naaman. As Naaman said, he'll be presenting this later this evening at the academic sessions. So next we have Arianna Ornaghi from University of Warwick to discuss natural language processing analysis of judicial opinions.
Great. Thanks, Elliott. Great. Later today, I will be presenting joint work with Elliott and Daniela Chen, in which what we do is that we try to construct a text-based measure for gender attitudes. And what's interesting is that we are using it for gender attitudes there, but we think that we can potentially apply to different type of attitudes as well going forward. Next slide, please. So the main motivation for our project is actually relates to the fact that women are underrepresented at the top of the legal profession. In particular, in US circuit courts, which is going to be the focus of our study, only 26% of sitting judges were women in 2018. So the policy question that we try to ask is whether the treatment of female judges that is due, whether differential treatment of female judges that is due to gender attitudes has a role to play in explaining this gap. Can I get the next slide, please? Now, of course, the challenge to answering this research question is that measuring the attitudes of circuit judges is very challenging. And what's interesting to note here is that this is not only true of judges, but it's true of many people who are kind of in policy-making positions that we might be interested in studying or we might be interested in understanding more about, but are not directly available for researchers. So we address this challenge by exploiting a unique feature of the setting, and that is the fact that for these judges, we have a large corporal written text. And as a result, what this means is that we can apply kind of insights that come from the natural language processing literature that are aimed at measuring bias in languages to try and understand kind of attitudes, and in particular attitudes towards gender from text. In particular, we measure gender attitudes by using by looking at the use of gender stereotypes in language. The measure that we develop, which we call gender slant, is based on the strength of the association of men and careers and women with families in the opinions that are authored by a judge. And the opinions are the text that is written by the judge to support the decisions that they make in a case. Now, we are interested in this project to try and understand how these genders land influences decision. And in order to really be able to say something of the effect of slant, we use the fact that cases are quasi-randomly assigned to judges, which means that the cases that are assigned to judges that have higher or lower measures of gender slant are going to be similar. So we can compare the effect of slant. Is not just going to be picking up something else. And in addition to this, we control for a number of characteristics of the judge to try and really isolate the effect of gender attitudes. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, what do we find? Well, we find that judges that have higher gender slant work more conservatively in gender-related cases. And so we use this as a way of validating our measure, meaning that the way in which we measure gender attitudes actually reflects, actually influences judges' behavior in a domain where we would expect it to do so. And in addition, we find that higher slanted judges also interact with their female colleagues differently. And what's interesting here is that these are all dimensions that might be career relevant for these judges. And to really make the case that what we're picking up has to do with gender preferences, we also show that gender slant does not really impact interactions with judges with other characteristics.
Thank you, Arianna. So there are two more presentations that will be given later this evening, but the two authors, Alex and Tobias, couldn't join for today's preview session. But as I mentioned, Alex Stremitzer will be presenting both of these, of Alex's and Tobias's papers are interesting experimental studies of a human-AI interaction, showing that humans behave and think quite differently when they're interacting with AI agents rather than human agents. And also the Alex Stremitzer's paper brings up important issues of medical consent when some of the medical decision-making process is automated. And Tobias shows that when there's an automated component to detecting misbehavior, people they set different thresholds for penalties. So I encourage you to check out those papers. You can see the long version shortly. So before we get to that, I wanted to open it up for a Q&A. So Daniela, I had a question for you. And that's really amazing that you and Marina read so many papers in different disciplines. And do you have a thought about, it's like just like the definition or the conception of artificial intelligence? Is it different across the disciplines?
I would say so. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And I mean, I just also want to be clear. We don't only talk about AI. We do talk about experiments that look at AI, but also just about machines or automated agents or any kinds of methods. So we did find there are a lot of different definitions in disciplines. So we don't discuss that in detail, but we just kind of try to have as broad of an approach as possible in order to be able to include as much as possible.
And do you have any can you think off the top of any examples of that? Because I can imagine, like, in psychology, they're going to really be thinking about this in terms of intelligence, like a kind of, human, like sort of set of problem solve, like cognitive ability.
Yeah, cognition is a good example.
Science, they're probably talking about, just like a regression model. Does that come through in how they talk about it?
Yeah, I think that is the case. Then production rules, for example, is a word that I've mostly encountered in either psychology or in more kind of computer science fields, versus algorithm that is used maybe surprisingly more in behavioral economics. So also the words algorithm aversion, algorithm appreciation are both from kind of a behavioral economics or psychology literature. And they're often quite close to, say, automation bias, automation-induced complacency, but those words I've never seen occur in behavioral economics. So I think oftentimes people are talking about very similar things, but using very different language. Okay.
And Naaman, I had a question for you about I guess my sense of Bitcoin blockchain is that there's no undo button, where if something gets added to the blockchain, it's there forever. But I might be mistaken about that. But in your case of kind of data set collection, is that a potential problem?
Yeah, so I mean, we consider this cases like where the data itself also, we have reasons to, let's say, make the data also very open and transparent. But if you want really to keep the data, let's say, private, or you think that in future you may want to delete this data and not have it accessible by any means, then it's possible actually to host this data on external sites, for example, on a cloud. And but still you can use some kind of hash of the data set and still make the entire info chain system work.
Great, thank you. And could you comment a bit about some of the commercial applications that you were referring to?
Yeah, so there are a lot of commercial applications. I mean, the example that I just gave was related to service monitoring, right? And there are actually lots of companies in Switzerland as well that their entire business is based on just this service monitoring, and they act as these trusted third parties. And but if you want to replace these trusted third parties, but so service monitoring is one example, but also insurance, for example, if you want to settle insurance claims, then also many times, for example, if we talk about these crop insurances, then in agriculture, for example, then also there has to be a trusted third party that confirms that the crop was not successful, let's say, and then the farmers get compensated. Or it also happens in these public funded infrastructure projects. There is a contractor, let's say, and his his payment is due depending on whether the project was executed successfully or not. And then somebody will inspect it and will confirm, yes, the project is up to the mark, and then the payment gets done. So everything, if you want to decentralize this, right, and make it in a more transparent way, then I think this is where we come. But strategic incentives that people have, either through bribes, or somebody can be bribed for to lie, or they have these kinds of intrinsic incentives to lie because they want to manipulate the outcome somehow. And so that's how this game theoretic part comes in.
I see. Thank you, Naaman. So we had one comment, or I'm not sure if it's a question, from DC in the chat. Did you want to summarize what you meant about delegatability or delegability in AI, DC? Oh, hi, David. Yeah.
I just think it is an interesting paper and related to Daniela's research. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but it's interesting to think about what should be delegated. I just clicked on a link very quickly before. So there's kind of two questions: what should be delegated, and then what are the empirical question that we're looking at is, are humans willing to make this delegation? And the interesting thing about algorithm aversion is that there are papers that show it in a moral situation. So for decisions that affect a third party, for example, or for decisions in the medical field, or kind of, with life and death. But then there are also papers showing algorithm aversion in very analytical cases. So one of the leading examples is where participants are asked to estimate how many passengers an airline will have in the next year. So arguably not a very kind of moral case, but still, in this experiment, the participants choose to make the predictions themselves rather than give it to an algorithm. Now, according to the authors, this is because they see the algorithm make mistakes before. And while they might forgive a human making a mistake, because Tuer is human after all, they don't forgive algorithmic mistakes. Now, we develop a bit more in the review, of course, on how this translates into other papers. But I think it's interesting because, yeah, there's two questions, right? Is it good from a technical sense? Would the algorithm do better? Is it good or correct from a moral sense? Then, of course, it's somewhat of a normative answer. And then just empirically, are people willing to do so, to delegate?
I see. Very interesting. And I have an additional question about this review. So you see studies from different disciplines. I wonder the norms of conducting this kind of research, is that varying across disciplines? For example, the subjects of their study, do different disciplines choose different survey participants or something like that?
Yeah, so that's definitely the case. What we try to do is, so we include experiments that use different ways of eliciting measures. So for example, we use both stated preferences and revealed preferences. We have studies that use subject pools that are students in a lab, so kind of the more traditional one, but there are also some that take place in the field, that take place with real doctors and so on. And we actually have a very extensive appendix where we summarize these main methodological differences. What we do focus on is experiments. So we only include some kind of experimental setup, and we don't include, for example, surveys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. And thank you, Daniela. So I think that I don't see any more questions in the chat. If there's any more, please put them in now, or feel free to unmute and ask your question. But I would propose that we wrap up early, and we can see you for the more detailed discussion and feedback session at 7 o'clock.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Let me just wrap up quickly the discussions of today. What a great exchange we had so far. So for those who haven't met me at the beginning, my name is Sanja Fabrio. I'm a co-founder and managing director of RegHorizon, that together with ETH Zurich hosts this conference today and tomorrow. So let me first thank you for your interest and active involvement throughout the conference, because your thoughts, your contributions, your questions have really made it relevant for us all. I will just very quickly wrap up the topics that we covered today. And I'd like just to mention what we are going to hear tomorrow. So we had throughout the afternoon a very insightful discussion on the first panel on trust, or shall I say trustworthiness, because that was the word that was rightfully introduced, innovation and growth. We heard answers and probably opened more questions on the ways to look at the key areas, such as the specific challenges of balancing the innovation and regulation of AI, the elements of an effective AI policy, including those that promote competition and mitigate business risk, and some suggestions on how to bridge the digital divide between the developing and developed countries that looks like it's rather widening than closing. In panel 2 on data privacy and consumer protection, we covered the differences in dealing with regulating data versus regulating AI. We also covered how regulations can adapt quickly in terms of developments and staying relevant, essentially, how we can ensure that we experiment and that we learn both as a society, but more importantly as regulators, and stay close to the technology. Some suggestions were also given by very inspiring Dr. Weinberger to regulators who said, do be close to technology so that you can understand it and ensure that you are inclusive of everybody. The word of inclusion, or the notion of inclusiveness, has been very high. And I think this is spot on where we'd like to be, and we definitely want to continue this conference in that direction. You have just heard now the peak preview of the academic review sessions that are starting at 7 o'clock. Arvin will reshare the link in the chat, so please join. I think it's promising to be very diverse and very, very interesting 2 sessions. Tomorrow, we will start at 2 p.m. sharp, CET, Central European Time. For those who are following us from different geographies, do make sure that you are confirming the through the converter that is in your registration when you need to join. You don't want to miss it, because I think it's going to be, again, a very engaging discussion. We will start tomorrow with a panel on geoharmonization of regulatory policies. We will discuss what are the steps in creating and implementing a cross-border coordinated global approach to AI policy. Actually, we can ask whether it's relevant to have one, for whom, why, and then how we can actually potentially achieve it. We will then zoom into a specific sector we all have very high stakes in. We all care about our health, and the health sector is one of the key sectors where the AI has a huge potential and a promise, but obviously has to be very safely implemented and deployed so that we definitely mitigate the risk and ensure the safety and performance. And then the third panel will go into more details on how we can all get ready for really building a better future for us. And that means individuals, organizations, civil society, and yes, the regulatory bodies that need to play their role. That is very, very clear. So as we kept hearing throughout the day today, the building an effective and well-conceived regulation will first need to bring all relevant parties together. So since we now heard what we all think are these relevant parties, we heard academia, we heard civil society, businesses, and regulators. We are very happy that all of them are represented on this conference. And it has to be a collaborative effort. As I mentioned at the outset, and I'd like to repeat that, in the next few months, we will be focusing on setting up multidisciplinary projects that will be based on some of the outcomes of this conference, and definitely on the identified areas that you have all brought. So as we progress through tomorrow's day, and even still today, as you go and follow the academic sessions, please think about your specific needs and challenges as you deploy the AI organization in your organizations, and tell us what they are. Tell us also what is your expertise and how can you contribute, because we need to do that inclusively. We need to build these solutions together. Our contact details, I believe, are in the chat. So it's connect@reghorizon.com. And we do really look forward to hearing from you. I personally look very much to another very interactive day tomorrow. Please don't forget to join at 2 p.m. Central European Time tomorrow. I'll say now goodbye and wishing you enjoyable and very insightful academic sessions that start at 7 p.m. Thank you.